Today we're going to talk about 5 things that you may be doing that continue to make you sound like a beginner guitarist. Now, if you just started playing guitar, of course you're going to sound like a beginner guitarist, but just being aware of these things and being able to focus on these things early on is going to get you steps ahead of other players that have been playing for longer periods of time. And it's going to make you sound like you've been playing for a longer period of time. Now, if you've been playing for many months or years now and you still feel like you sound like a beginner guitarist, then definitely check these out. Being able to correct these 5 things at any point in your guitar journey may be the difference between sounding like a beginner for a long time or finally leaving that beginner mode. Hey everyone, David Chiriboga here. Welcome to the channel, and if you're new to the channel, my goal is to guide you through your Spanish guitar journey and try to simplify the process for you. All right, let's get right into it. Number 1, don't cut off your notes. Let your notes breathe. So by that, what I mean is try to go with more legato playing, more connected playing. Don't cut off your notes so fast. What I see in a lot of beginner players, even players that have been playing for many months, they just neglect some of these small little details like this. So either in the left hand, they'll lift up their fingers a little too quickly and cut off the notes, or with the right hand, you might just mute the strings a little too quickly when you're doing your rest stroke, your picado, or arpeggios, just letting the hand fall back on the strings. Our goal is to try to let it sustain as much as possible at first. It's always easier to go to a staccato cut-off sound later in the future if the music calls for it, but ideally what we want to do is connect it more, so let the notes ring. So again, if you just started playing guitar, some of these corrections might take longer because you just don't have the technical ability yet, or you don't have the muscle memory to do stuff like that yet. But now that you're aware of it, you can be very intentional and strive for that. The one word that I'll leave you with to remember this is just to let the notes breathe. Number 2, when playing arpeggios, make sure you're not pulling on the strings and snapping them with too much force. Make sure that you're doing your arpeggios with a pushing motion towards the back of your palm, not a pulling out. So just be careful you're not overexerting with something like the arpeggios or even with the picado, because if you're overexerting and if your form isn't correct and you're pulling out, you're going to get this popping sound that is definitely a telltale sign of a beginner guitarist. It's just about pushing back very nice and lightly. Number 3, don't rush your upbeats or your eighth notes. Now, if you're not sure what that is, basically your downbeat is anytime you hear the click with the metronome. So you'd have 1, 2, 3. And your upbeat is what goes in between. So you'd have 1 and 2 and 3 and. So as an example, if I had 1, 2, and 3 as a phrase, we'd want to play that like this. 1, 2, and 3. What I see happen with a lot of beginner students is that since we're playing these etudes or these pieces and exercises at very slow paces, then they get impatient with their eighth notes and kind of rush some of them. Number 4, when you start to learn some repertoire in some of your first pieces, only play as fast as you can play the hardest part in the piece. What do I mean by that? Well, maybe the majority of the piece is pretty manageable and you're able to learn it and not have too much difficulty with it, but there might be 1 or 2 measures with a difficult transition, and that transition takes you double the time of what it normally takes you to play any of the other measures. So if you're playing the piece at a nice fast pace and then you make it to that measure, it looks very beginnerish to get stuck and then take a delay and just change the tempo basically for a few measures and then go back to a faster pace. I'd much rather hear you play the piece or the etude at a more manageable, slower speed, even if that's too simple for you, so that when you make it to your harder transition part, then it won't be as noticeable if you have to slow down just a little bit. And then as you go getting better and progressing with the piece, eventually you'll catch up and be able to play it all together. But that's always a little bit of a telltale sign for me when I see somebody who gets stuck on that one part. It shows their weakness. You have to almost stop the piece just to learn that transition. And on the extreme side, if those couple measures that are costing you a lot of trouble are that bad where you almost have to stop the piece or get so slow where it's super noticeable, then the piece just probably isn't ready to be performed as a piece yet. And I would just really laser focus on those couple measures just to correct them and not worry about playing through the whole piece the whole time. All right, lastly, number 5. This is more of a mental note, but very important. Play with confidence. Don't show your insecurities when you're up on stage, or even if you're just gonna play for your friends and family. And definitely, don't apologize for your mistakes. The worst thing you could do is start playing a piece and maybe you have a couple flubs. You don't want to make it public and start apologizing, even if it's just for your family and friends, because then you're showing off your mistakes and your insecurities. Maybe somebody didn't even notice the mistake. And even if they did, if you just play through it and are able to catch up again, then that's just as important, and that's much better than having to make it public and make it more focus on that mistake. What you focus on is where you go. That's what they say. And if you start focusing on your mistakes, starting a performance by apologizing and making them more public, then your mind is going to start thinking about all those mistakes, and it's just going to make things worse. So just play with confidence. Now, I know this one's easier said than done. I used to be in those shoes. My family and friends would ask me to play all the time when I just started playing my first few years, where I was stuck in beginner's mode for a long time. And I would just set myself up for failure by kind of setting up and telling everyone I'm not ready, and kind of delaying the process and telling them no for a while, and also psyching myself out in my head and getting more nervous about it. So all we can do is, if we're gonna play, let's just go in there and play with confidence, play what you know. Another quick tip, if you're in that type of situation with your family and friends and you're very nervous or don't want to play, I would suggest just pick something very simple, something that you think you can really attack and get done. Don't try to go for your more advanced repertoire where you might want to show off, but it's just gonna go downwards if you don't feel totally prepared or if the nerves are still eating you up. But I'll save more of that for another video. As I've taught for many years, I've seen many patterns and habits pop up with my students. Now these 5 are some of the ones that I've seen pop up and repeat the most within my students, and that I remember also having to deal with myself. So please let me know in the comments if you were dealing with any of these, and if you were able to correct them or you're working on them now. I'd love to hear about your progress. Or if I missed any little ones that you feel I should add to the list, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to keep practicing and enjoy the journey.